Welcome to Family Basics 101. I'm Dr. Bruce McClure, and as we continue our five-part series entitled Self-Esteem, today we will talk about self-image and self-esteem. Self-image is the manner that a person sees oneself. Self-image is the manner through which a person sees himself physically, behaviorally, relationally, spiritually, as well as socially. Self-image is also driven by how a person envisions themselves, which drives how they believe everyone else see them also. In terms of how self-image plays into how a person perceives themselves, self-image encompasses things like how you look, how others view you, how you think others are thinking of you, the status in life you want others to see in you, and how well you are liked first by yourself and then by others. So self-image becomes the mirror through which an individual sees himself or herself when they are looking at self. Someone said perception is everything. Ad agencies are in business to market products, ideas, and beliefs about how you should see yourself. In a certain type dress, wearing a certain designer suit, certain living conditions that are exclusively for you, they'll make it sound like this ad was made just for you. Eating in a certain restaurant, the prestige of that, associating with certain people, and the prominence and the importance that is tied to it. Ad agencies, marketing groups, spend millions each day showing you who you should look like, who you should feel like, where you should live, and all of that plays into self-image. Self-image, therefore, impacts your behaviors toward others, how you think about others, and also how people in turn receive you, either positively or negatively, based largely on how assured you are with yourself, which is better known as your self-esteem. So your self-image drives your self-valuation or your self-esteem. It's not unusual for a person's self-image to be shaped by false input, either external to self or, sadly, internally from self. False self-image that is developed internally is oftentimes a fabricated method constructed by oneself to overcompensate or sometimes even to undercompensate for real or false life circumstances. In other words, it becomes the methodology for a person to see themselves in a bigger, better light than life really is around them. A person who lives in poverty can create or fabricate an image of wealth. A person who lives in wealth, in order not to take on the family pride, not boastfully, but this is just who we are, wealthy, that person can end up living the life of a pauper, trying to pretend they're not who they are. So self-image, how one perceives himself, herself, drives how that person feels about self. And vice versa, self-esteem will cause a person to falsely construct a picture of who they are based on how they feel others feel about them. In the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 17, verses 32 through 37, there's an interesting story about a young man by the name of David who is really going to be king of Israel. He'll ultimately become the second king of Israel behind Saul. Saul, we've already talked about, has low self-esteem, low self-image of himself. Now understand, Saul, when he becomes king, already has low self-esteem, low self-image, and now in the text of 1 Samuel chapter 17, this same man is going to talk to David about how David should see himself. A person with so low self-esteem, low self-image is going to talk to a young man who feels pretty good about himself and try to pull him into a negative self-view of who he is and what he's capable of doing. David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of this giant Goliath. Thy servant will go and fight this Philistine." And Saul, this low self-esteem person, says to David, "Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth." Do you see how that external, low self-imaged individual is trying to get David to see himself in a lower state than he really is? But because David has a positive self-image of himself and a positive self-esteem regarding himself, David said unto Saul, "Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by the beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defiled the armies of the living God." David said, "Even more so, seeing he has defiled the armies of the living God, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine." And it just amazes Saul, the self-image David has of himself and the self-esteem possessed by David. David does not have a false self-image. David does not have an over-exaggerated self-image, but he is realistic based on his track record, based on how he has been blessed by God. David is living in the day where he feels good about his accomplishments, about his abilities. They're not being exaggerated. They're not being minimized. And all Saul could say unto David is, "Go, and the Lord be with you." I want you to appreciate self-image. People can put you down. People can be so critical, and you will begin to buy into the imaging that people create. David chose to buy only into the imaging that God had given him. And when David stayed in the imaging of God, he had a positive self-esteem about himself, and that's how he got the victory. I'll see you back in class again next time. Don't be late, and don't skip class.